Canadians received some unexpected but good news today on the economic front as the country's annual inflation rate for February clocked in at just 2.8%. That's down from 2.9% in January. Many economists had anticipated the rate to tick back up, actually, above 3%. Key to the slowing rise in prices was a deceleration in the cost of cell phone plans, internet plans, and groceries. It was offset, however, by an increase in the year-over-year cost of gasoline. Rent and mortgage interest rate costs also continue to apply upward pressure. David Dodge served as governor of the Bank of Canada from 2001 to 2008. He is now a senior advisor at Bennett Jones. David Dodge, it's good to speak with you again.
Good day, David.
I wonder what's your assessment of where we are. The inflation number, it beat many of the economists' expectations, coming in below 3%. Were you as surprised as they were?
The number bounces around from month to month. I was pleased that the balance in this month happened to be down. We are working our way through what I would call the most difficult half mile of getting back to something pretty close to target. And so I don't think we should be jumping up and down for joy, particularly because of this one number. But the number has been coming down steadily, and even though we've got a way to go, I think it bodes well for the next 12 or 18 months.
Well, people have been jumping up and down with rage up until this point, right? Because costs are going up and interest rates going with it. And I don't want to make too much out of a single data point in a single month, David Dodge, but food inflation below the headline number for the first time since October 2021 at just 2.4%. That strikes me as a very encouraging trend. How do you see that one?
It's certainly encouraging for households. And especially for middle and lower income households, because food constitutes such a large fraction of their budget. So yes, that's a move in the right direction. And the other reason that I think it's very helpful that we had a movement in food is that this is what we as ordinary consumers perceive about inflation. We buy gas for our cars, we buy food for our households, and those are the prices that we instinctively monitor, and we know from week to week what's going on. So it's very helpful.
So on food, what do you think is causing that? I've seen some analysis that maybe we're finally at the point that all the global sort of supply snarls are starting to sort out, and things are just getting a little bit better. How do you read this shift in the food price inflation?
Well, I mean, I think we're on the verge of a very dry summer. And so we may well see some items go back up again with those drought conditions. I mean, it is volatile. Food is volatile, and that's why central banks, quite rightly, tend to look at core. So they take out the month-to-month and even year-to-year movements in food prices because we know they are volatile. And the same thing has been true historically about energy.
No, that's a good point, because so much of the spikes in food we saw was droughts or floods or avian flu, all things that were affecting supply of food. But you mentioned energy. Another thing that is volatile is gasoline. It increased year over year in February, and this is one of those volatile numbers. What's your expectations of where you think the other big thing people spend their money on might go?
We don't know. I mean, what happens in OPEC and OPEC Plus and so on is important, but it looks like crude oil prices are stabilizing and are likely to remain in the $70 to $80 range going forward, and just stability here will be helpful.
Well, the good news is maybe some stability there and a decrease in food prices. Rent and mortgage, though, they're up. And one of the biggest upward pressures that we're seeing on overall inflation. We've seen rent clocked in at an increase of 8.2%. And mortgage interest costs, and I can tell you this is someone who renewed their mortgage last year, up 26.3% in February. What point do those numbers and their impact on overall inflation start to factor into the central bank's decision when it comes to interest rates?
Well, mortgage interest costs don't. They automatically take it out, and quite rightly take it out, because that's what they actually influence. And so I think, and I continue to focus on the traditional measure of core, which is CPI minus food, energy, and mortgage interest cost. But then coming to the other real issue, which is rents, and rents have been going up, and it looks like they're going to go up a bit further before they can possibly come down, because we continue, our government continues to insist that we keep importing people a lot faster than we can grow our economy, and very much faster than we can reasonably expect to build new housing. So there's no silver lining there on rents, unfortunately, and for especially the younger people who are mainly renters, and for old people that are on fixed income and still rent, who haven't been lucky enough to buy their own house over their lifetime. Rent is a big issue, and it is one that in the end can only be solved first by building more houses, but secondly, by having governments coordinate in a way that we don't increase population much faster than we can reasonably build houses for them.
No, that's certainly something they're trying to do on the international student issue, but you're right. That is one of the challenges that's been identified in this. So when you look at that whole bundle of issues, David Dodge, as a former central banker, when would you predict when we might see an interest rate cut? I mean, people are betting it's June, the more pessimistic are July, and the super optimistic say April. Where do you land on that timeline?
I don't think that really matters, David. The real issue is we're on track to go down by the end of 2025. That's for sure. And I want to be careful. I won't say for sure, but that looks like the track we're on. But what I would emphasize, and I think is really important, is that we're not going back to interest rates that we observed prior to COVID. We are going to interest rates that are going to look more, probably have a 4 number in front of them, or at least a very high 3 number in front of them. And so it's not going to be the dramatic reversal that we had on the upswing, where we went from 2% to 6, if you're looking at mortgages, or 7.
Right. So those historically low interest rates we saw post 9/11, post financial.
Right. We're not going back.
Those are the outliers. We're going to recalibrate to normal. I just some clarity. You said going down by the end of 25. Was that a misspeak, or do you think it's going to be a whole extra year, or do you think it's 2024 we're going to see it go down?
Well, I think that this last mile on disinflation is going to take at least a year, and they'll come down. But the one thing that, as a former central banker, I would say is that we cannot make the mistake of getting too optimistic about that deceleration, because we've got to maintain the confidence. People have to have confidence that indeed, in the end, we're going back to a period where prices are going to be rising, in the order of 2% a year, and be confident of that as they make their own plans for consumption and investment.
David Dodge, we always appreciate the time and the insight. That's David Dodge, former governor of the Bank of Canada. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, David.